Good morning and welcome back to Dr. Logic. Awkwardly tries to get this video going for about the 6th time in a row. What I want to talk about today is a system that is stronger than K. Now, one thing that we like about K is because it doesn't make any assumptions about the nature of necessity being modeled. However, back in video 164, you'll remember we talked about a variety of different modal principles that you might actually want to incorporate into your conception of logic, depending on what type of necessity you're looking at. One of these, which is sometimes called the axiom of necessity, is the idea that necessity implies truth, or that box P implies P. Now, this is not something that is valid in system K, and therefore cannot be proven, is not a theorem, and therefore any system of any type of modality where you think this principle is a good principle is something that we will need to add to basic system K in order to actually be able to make any inferences with it. So what types of necessity might be ones where you would like to have necessity implying truth? Well, one of these is logical necessity. If we are talking about things that are necessarily true, then if something is necessarily true but not true, then something really weird has gone wrong with our understanding of necessity and truth. So logical necessity, this is a good principle for it. Epistemic necessity is another one. If you know something, then it is true. Generally, knowledge is taken to be factive and that you can't know false things. Certain types of physical necessity might be another kind of way to think about this. So if the laws of physics require something to be true, then that thing is true. So this is weaker than logical necessity, you might think, because maybe the laws of physics could have been otherwise, but they still kind of, you can go from that type of necessity to the truth in the actual world, or indeed in any possible world. There are, of course, interpretations of modality where this principle is not going to be reasonable, but we'll talk about those in a later video. So we've got the axiom of necessity, box P implies P. This is also called system T. I'll tell you a little bit about the name of both the axiom and the logical system in another video. Don't want to get distracted here. So if we have this axiom, we can add it to system K to get a stronger system, because we can now prove things that we couldn't prove before. One of the things that we can prove is, in fact, that necessity implies truth, because you'll remember that you can write down an axiom at any point in your proof, and that counts as a theorem, because you can just stop and be like, hey, look, I proved my axiom because I wrote it down. Isn't that great? Now, of course, there are going to be other more interesting things that we can prove, and we'll get to that in the next video. But I want to say a bit more about like what this logic looks like. So you may also remember from video 166 or 167, around about there, that we proved a correspondence between box P implies P and reflexivity, in the sense that if this formula is valid on a frame, the frame has to be reflexive. So whereas system K characterizes the class of all Kripke frames, system T characterizes the class of reflexive frames. So as long as we are only looking at frames where every world can see itself, this box P implies P, necessity implies truth, will always be true. So keep this in the back of your mind, because we will use this both to prove that certain things are not going to be theorems of T, because we can give them reflexive countermodels that make them false. And we can also use it to show that system T is sound. In fact, we've already done it, because system T consists of all of the propositional tautologies, which we already know are sound, axiom K, which we know is valid on all frames, so it's going to be valid on all reflexive frames. We've already shown that if the frame is reflexive, then T must be valid, and vice versa. So as long as we're only looking at reflexive frames, we know that our axiom will never be false. And then we've just got the same rules of inferences, necessitation, modus ponens, substitution, and we proved that they're valid for all frames, just as we did axiom K, and therefore they're also going to be sound on the class of purely reflexive frames. So there's your brief introduction to system T. We will prove some theorems in it, show some interesting properties that it have, and I promise you, I will get to a discussion about why it is called T. Until then, take care. See you next time.